read the article that I've posted, I think it was like a week or two ago, from the New Yorker about the Getty family trust. I think it was like Getty family trust issues or something like that was the title of the article in the New Yorker. But anyways, I read that article. There were 4 books that jumped out at me that I was like, I'm buying all these books and adding them to the library. And so I bought all 4 of them. One of the 4 books that I bought was, the namesake of the trust, John Paul Getty, wrote a book called How to Be Rich. And it was the smallest, easiest, shortest book out of the 4 that I bought. So I just said, okay, let me start there. I was already wrapping up a very technical book by Garrett Sutton, one of the Rich Dad advisors, on LLCs and limited partnerships. So I kind of, it was good. That was a good book. I'll definitely talk about that book at some point. But I was like, okay, like before I get into another like 600 pager, let me knock out this easy John Paul Getty book. And the John Paul Getty book was like 214 pages, and it was a breezy kind of read. His firsthand account of, how to be rich. And I'll tell you why I put that in quotes in a second. But anyway, so I selected that one. I'm going to do that one, was my thought. Knock it out real quick. And then I'm going to go on to the next really big endeavor, which is going to be, which I've now got teed up, which is The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. So that's going to be kind of a big deal there to get through that one. I think that one's like 600 pages or just shy of 600 pages. So anyway, How to Be Rich by John Paul Getty. Title of the book is totally misleading. Not that, and honestly, at this point, guys, whenever I see a book about like how to be rich, how to get rich, how to become rich, I already know it has no such thing in it, right? It's marketing, right? It's a headline that catches your attention. So I already know that going in. You say, well, why do you still read it, Chris? I still read it for 2 reasons. Number one, I'm looking for that tiny little nugget or 2 or 3 or 4 that particular individual employed on their journey to success that resonates with me and that I can replicate. Nobody's template is 100%, replicatable, if that's a word. But you can always look for like a couple little things here and there that you can also do, or that makes sense for you, that you can incorporate into your journey. So that's what I'm usually looking for there. Okay. And then the other reason I read it is almost kind of cynically, to see how much they avoid the subject of actually becoming rich. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because it's not going to tell you anything about that. So you kind of wonder, like, how well do they dodge actually answering that question, right? But really, it's the first reason. I'm kind of being, sarcastic there with the second reason. But it is always interesting to kind of note that fact when you read a book like that. So anyway, the book really covered, had some brief background on how Getty's parents struck oil in the early 1900s, and he famously, got like $1 million out of it or something, went to live in like Los Angeles, and he partied for like a year or 2, and then he came back to the business and really, really expanded the business that his parents started. It's really John Paul Getty, or it's not John, it's Jean Paul Getty, something like that. J. Paul Getty. He goes by Paul, I think, actually, but J. Paul Getty came back to the business, exploded the business into international oil development. Like he went to the Middle East, and he really made the fortune on deals like that. So he's the real namesake of the Getty fortune. And so he gives his background. He talks about how he got started. He talks about the whole thing that got him back into the business, and relays some of his experience working in the Oklahoma oil fields, and then eventually in California he bought land for oil exploration and blah blah blah. So you get a taste of that, and then really, like, most of the book doesn't have anything to do with being or getting rich. It's actually like how to be a good executive, how to work hard, He talks about, he has like some general advice for like investing in the stock market and real estate and art, which is interesting. I actually enjoyed those portions of it. And so it wasn't like there was nothing usable in it. But it just, like I said, it just didn't, he also has like social commentary, political commentary, like, the fact that Americans are not as, in his view at that time, not as cultured as, let's say, Europeans. So he talks about that. He talks about, being your own self in business, like don't conform. If you really want to start a business or make your fortune or whatever, you can't be like everybody else. You can't just replicate everybody else's approach. You have to kind of be yourself and be nonconformist and so on. So it was an interesting book. It wasn't a bad book. It just had nothing to do with the title. I mean, I think the key word was be, not get. It wasn't how to get rich. It was how to be rich. And I think his definition of being rich is, knowing the things he was talking about, behaving the ways he was talking about in the book. Being cultured, knowing how to buy art, knowing how to buy stocks, knowing how to buy real estate, knowing how to be yourself, that sort of thing. So it's just a turn of phrase that I think kind of served Getty well in terms of the book and that sort of thing. So would I recommend it to anybody? I mean, unless you had a really sharp interest in J. Paul Getty, I would say no, you could skip it. There's no reason to watch it. I mean, no reason to read it, excuse me. No reason to read the book. I also think, Getty, he kind of whitewashes his own biography. I mean, Getty, he was married 5 times. He does mention it at one point. He was married 5 times. He had sons that he was relatively disconnected from other things I've read. His personal life was somewhat in disarray. Now, I'm not passing any judgment on it. Let me be clear about that. I'm not saying it was good or bad. I'm just saying that he doesn't really get into any detail about the parts of his life that, he himself labels unsuccessful. I mean, he actually says at the end of the book, all my marriages were failures. I focus more on business than my marriages. He just makes a very passing reference to his sons. Doesn't really talk about generational wealth or providing wealth for his children. He kind of talks in the book about giving them entry-level jobs in his businesses, but he doesn't mention anything about passing on wealth to them, which eventually he did. Different factions of the family, got very sizable portions of his, I believe, $4 billion fortune. So he never really talks about that or addresses like legacy wealth or anything to that effect. He just kind of talks about giving them jobs and make them work for it, things like that. So, again, not necessarily makes the book bad, but it does leave out an entire dimension of his life and himself. But you can argue that wasn't the point of the book. So just kind of a warning to anybody who knows that about him, that's not going to be in the book. But yeah, so that's just kind of my high-level impression, guys. I mean, I probably, at different points in time, will reference things from Getty's writings, particularly, if it's first-hand experience type stuff, it would be from this book. I do have another one of the books from the article in the New Yorker that I got was, an author wrote a book about the Getty dynasty. I'm looking forward to that. And then there's another book that I believe was Getty's, it was like his diary that got turned into a book, I think. So whereas this book was less of an autobiography, this book that I'm talking about that I read, How to Be Rich, was more of a manual on how to be rich. But there's another book that I think is more of like a personal account of his life, sort of like a diary turned into a book, turned into an autobiography. So that one may include more information about some of the other things I was talking about. Maybe it gets a little more personal in that one. But anyway, if you guys are interested in the book or have any questions about it or whatever, just drop me a comment or a question below. And thanks for watching this. Hope everybody has a great Thursday night. Talk to you guys soon.